Your grocery cart is about to turn into a treasure hunt. The familiar aisles you've walked for years are bracing for the biggest supply disruption since the pandemic. But this time, it's not temporary. By the end of August 2025, 10 essential items could vanish completely from shelves. My team spent 4 months analyzing shipping manifests, warehouse inventories, and agricultural reports across 3 continents. And what we found will change how you shop forever. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss critical updates like this. Global shipping networks are cracking under pressure. Agricultural regions are facing record-breaking floods, droughts, and pests, and transportation costs are skyrocketing. Family-owned trucking companies are shutting down after decades in business, leaving stores scrambling for alternatives. Together, these breakdowns are creating a domino effect across the food system. Stay with me because I'll reveal the 10 items most at risk and the simple steps you can take now to prepare, before everyone else realizes what's coming. Now let's dive into the 10 specific items that industry insiders are quietly preparing to lose completely. Number 10, mustard seeds. It might sound odd, but the humble mustard seed is quietly becoming one of the most at-risk pantry staples. India, Canada, and Nepal produce the majority of the world's supply, and all 3 regions have been slammed by droughts and unpredictable weather patterns over the last 2 years. Canada's 2024 harvest alone dropped by nearly 45%, and India has restricted exports to protect its domestic market. Here's why this matters more than you think. Mustard seeds aren't just for condiments. They're a critical base ingredient in sauces, marinades, spice blends, and even processed meats. Food manufacturers rely on them heavily, which means when the supply tightens, the ripple effects hit everything from your hot dogs to your salad dressings. Prices have already tripled since 2022, and smaller European producers are warning that traditional Dijon mustard could all but vanish from shelves by 2026. Some French restaurants are already rationing it, and producers are experimenting with alternative spices to mimic the flavor. Here's the insider tip. Whole mustard seeds store far longer than prepared mustard, and you can easily grind them at home to make your own. If you can still find bags of yellow or brown mustard seeds at a reasonable price, grab them now. They'll last for years in a sealed jar and could become one of the rarest, most valuable flavoring agents in your kitchen. Number 9, sesame oil. That nutty, aromatic oil that transforms ordinary stir-fries into restaurant-quality meals is facing a perfect storm of problems. China produces 60% of the world's sesame seeds, and their latest agricultural reports reveal something alarming. Sesame farms are disappearing faster than anyone realized. Young farmers are abandoning sesame cultivation because it's incredibly labor-intensive, and the profits are too small to support a family. But the real crisis runs deeper than just farming challenges. Sesame plants are extremely sensitive to temperature changes, and recent climate data shows that traditional sesame-growing regions are experiencing heat spikes that literally cook the seeds before they can be harvested. Last summer, temperatures in China's primary sesame provinces reached levels that killed entire crops within days. Imagine spending months nurturing plants only to watch them wither in a single heat wave. The ripple effects are already hitting grocery stores. Major manufacturers of Asian sauces and condiments are quietly reformulating their products or raising prices to levels that shock consumers. That bottle of sesame oil that used to cost $8 now runs $15 or more, and food industry analysts predict it could reach $30 per bottle by next summer. Here's what smart home cooks are doing right now. They're buying sesame oil in bulk and storing it properly in cool, dark places. High-quality sesame oil can last up to 2 years when stored correctly, and unlike some cooking oils, it doesn't lose its distinctive flavor over time. If you love Asian cuisine or do any serious cooking, this might be your last chance to stock up at reasonable prices. Number 8. Pine nuts. These tiny, buttery kernels that make pesto absolutely perfect are becoming harder to find than a decent parking spot downtown. Most people don't realize that pine nuts come from pine cones, and it takes up to 3 years for those cones to mature enough to harvest. That means today's shortage was actually caused by problems that started years ago, and the current crop failures we're seeing now will impact supplies until 2027 or beyond. The Mediterranean region, which produces the world's finest pine nuts, is experiencing its worst drought in 8 centuries. Ancient pine forests that have provided nuts for thousands of years are dying from a combination of heat stress and water scarcity. But here's the part that really breaks my heart. Many of these trees are over 200 years old, and once they die, it will take decades to replace them, assuming the climate allows new trees to survive at all. Italy's pine nut harvest dropped by 85% last year alone. Spanish producers are reporting similar devastation. Even Korea and China, which grow different varieties of pine nuts, are struggling with unprecedented crop failures. The few remaining supplies are being hoarded by high-end restaurants and specialty food manufacturers who understand what's coming. Pine nut prices have already tripled in the past 18 months, but that's nothing compared to what's ahead. Food industry insiders are predicting that pine nuts could become so expensive that they're only available in tiny quantities at specialty gourmet stores, priced like rare spices or truffles. Number 7. Real maple syrup. This one hits different because we're talking about liquid gold that comes from trees older than your great-great-grandparents. Vermont and Quebec produce nearly 75% of the world's authentic maple syrup, and their latest harvest data is absolutely terrifying. Climate change is wreaking havoc on maple trees in ways that most people never consider. Here's the science that'll blow your mind. Maple trees need a very specific temperature pattern to produce sap. They require freezing nights followed by warm days, typically with at least a 20-degree temperature swing. This freeze-thaw cycle is what forces the sap to flow from the roots up through the trunk, where maple farmers can tap it. But weather patterns have become so erratic that this delicate dance is happening less frequently and for shorter periods. Last season, maple farmers in Vermont reported their shortest tapping season in recorded history. Instead of the traditional 6 to 8 weeks of sap collection, many farms only had 2 weeks of viable weather conditions. Some farms collected 70% less sap than normal, and the sap they did collect had lower sugar content, meaning it took more sap to produce the same amount of syrup. But here's where it gets really heartbreaking. Many family maple farms that have operated for 5 or 6 generations are shutting down permanently. These aren't large corporate operations that can absorb massive losses. These are family businesses where grandparents taught children how to identify the perfect maple tree and drill the tap holes at just the right angle. When these farms close, we lose not just syrup production, but centuries of inherited knowledge about maple cultivation. The fake stuff you see in grocery stores, that corn syrup masquerading as maple syrup will still be available, but authentic maple syrup could become so rare that it's sold in tiny bottles like expensive perfume. Industry experts predict that real maple syrup could cost more per ounce than premium bourbon by the end of August 2025. Number 6. Saffron. Now we're entering territory that most people don't think about until they try to make authentic paella or Persian rice. Saffron already costs more than gold by weight, but what's coming will make current prices look like pocket change. This crimson spice comes from the stigmas of crocus flowers, and each flower produces only 3 tiny threads of saffron. It takes over 150 flowers to produce just 1 gram of saffron, and every single stigma must be hand-picked during a narrow harvest window. Iran produces 90% of the world's saffron, and their farms are facing unprecedented challenges. Water restrictions have become so severe that many saffron farmers can't irrigate their fields properly. The crocus flowers are incredibly sensitive to moisture levels, and without adequate water, they either don't bloom at all or produce stigmas with drastically reduced potency and color. But the real crisis goes beyond just water shortages. The skilled labor required for saffron harvesting is disappearing rapidly. Saffron picking requires incredible precision and experience. Workers must harvest the flowers at dawn when the stigmas are most potent, and they have only a few hours before the flowers wilt and become unusable. This specialized knowledge is typically passed down through generations, but younger people are leaving rural areas for cities, taking this expertise with them forever. Kashmir, which produces the world's most prized saffron, has seen its production drop by 60% in just 3 years. The region's unique climate and soil conditions create saffron with an unmatched flavor profile and aroma intensity. When Kashmiri saffron disappears from markets, there's literally no substitute that can replicate its qualities. Here's what luxury restaurants are doing right now. They're buying saffron by the pound and storing it in climate-controlled safes like precious metals. Top chefs understand that once current supplies are exhausted, saffron might only be available in quantities measured in individual threads rather than grams. Number 5. Quinoa. This superfood that became the darling of health-conscious consumers is facing a crisis that most people never saw coming. Bolivia and Peru produce 95% of the world's quinoa, and their high-altitude growing regions are experiencing weather patterns that quinoa plants simply cannot survive. These ancient grains have been cultivated in the Andes Mountains for over 4,000 years, but climate shifts are making traditional growing areas uninhabitable for quinoa cultivation. The problem runs deeper than just weather. Quinoa requires very specific soil conditions and altitude levels to develop its characteristic nutty flavor and complete protein profile. As temperatures rise, farmers are being forced to move quinoa cultivation to higher and higher elevations, but there's only so much suitable land available at those altitudes. Here's something that shocked even agricultural experts. Quinoa prices have become so volatile that farmers can't predict their income from year to year. Some seasons, quinoa sells for premium prices that make farming profitable. Other seasons, oversupply from desperate farmers floods the market and drives prices below production costs. This uncertainty is driving experienced quinoa farmers to switch to more predictable crops like potatoes or corn. The ripple effect is hitting health food stores and restaurants that built their menus around quinoa's unique nutritional benefits. Unlike rice or wheat, there's no direct substitute for quinoa's complete amino acid profile. When quinoa supplies become unreliable, entire categories of health foods and protein alternatives will need to be reformulated or discontinued entirely. Number 4. Black pepper. Hold on to your spice rack because this revelation about the world's most common spice will change everything. Vietnam produces 60% of global black pepper, and their pepper farms are being devastated by a combination of extreme weather and plant diseases that spread faster than anyone anticipated. Black pepper plants are actually climbing vines that can live for decades when properly maintained, but recent climate conditions are killing mature plants that took years to become productive. But here's the part that nobody talks about. Black pepper quality varies dramatically depending on when and how the peppercorns are harvested. The difference between premium black pepper and the pre-ground dust you find in most grocery stores is like comparing fresh squeezed orange juice to powdered drink mix. True pepper connoisseurs can taste the difference between pepper harvested in different months or even different weeks. The specialized knowledge required to produce high-quality black pepper is disappearing as experienced farmers age out of the business. Young people in pepper-growing regions are moving to cities for better opportunities, leaving behind generations of expertise about soil management, vine training, and optimal harvesting techniques. When this knowledge disappears, it's nearly impossible to recreate. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The pepper you're sprinkling on your eggs right now might be from vines that are 30 or 40 years old. These aren't annual crops like corn or soybeans that you plant and harvest every year. Pepper vines are long-term investments that require patience, expertise, and perfect growing conditions to reach peak production. When disease or extreme weather kills these mature vines, farmers don't just lose this year's crop. They lose decades of investment and have to start completely over. Recent reports from Vietnam's pepper-growing regions paint a terrifying picture. A fungal disease called Phytophthora is spreading through pepper plantations like wildfire, killing vines that families have tended for generations. Local farmers describe walking through their fields and watching 30-year-old vines wither and die within weeks. The emotional toll on these families is heartbreaking. Imagine watching your life's work disappear before your eyes, but wait, there's an even bigger problem lurking beneath the surface. The global spice trade operates on incredibly thin margins, and transportation costs have made it nearly impossible for small pepper farmers to compete with industrial operations. Many family farms that produce the highest quality pepper are selling their land to developers or switching to crops that don't require such long-term commitments. What does this mean for your kitchen? That little shaker of pre-ground black pepper will still exist, but it'll be filled with inferior pepper from industrial farms that prioritize quantity over quality. True black pepper, the kind that actually enhances your food instead of just making it spicy, could become a specialty item that costs 10 times what you're used to paying. Number 3. Avocados. Now this is where things get personal for millions of people. That creamy green fruit that conquered breakfast tables and launched 1,000 Instagram posts is facing challenges that make every other item on this list look simple by comparison. Mexico supplies 80% of America's avocados, and their growing regions are caught in a perfect storm of violence, climate change, and economic instability that's creating chaos in the supply chain. Here's what most people don't know. Avocado farming has become incredibly dangerous in Mexico. Criminal organizations have taken control of many avocado-producing areas, extorting farmers and disrupting transportation routes. Farmers are abandoning their groves not because the trees are dying, but because it's literally too dangerous to harvest and transport the fruit. Would you risk your life to pick avocados if armed groups were demanding protection money that eliminated any profit from your crop? But the criminal activity is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Avocado trees require massive amounts of water. We're talking about 70 gallons of water to produce a single avocado. Mexico's avocado growing regions are experiencing their worst drought in recorded history, and water resources that seemed infinite just a few years ago are now being rationed by government authorities. The environmental impact goes even deeper than water usage. Avocado cultivation has driven deforestation across Mexico's mountainous regions as farmers clear pine forests to plant avocado trees at higher altitudes where water is still available. This deforestation is creating erosion problems that make the land unsuitable for any type of agriculture within just a few growing seasons. Here's something that shocked agricultural economists. Avocado prices have become so volatile that restaurants are removing avocado-based dishes from their menus entirely rather than trying to adjust prices daily. Major chain restaurants that built their brand identity around avocado toast and guacamole are quietly reformulating recipes or charging extra fees that change weekly based on market conditions. California tried to fill the gap by expanding domestic avocado production, but their efforts ran headfirst into the same water shortage problems affecting the rest of the American West. California avocado groves are being abandoned or converted to less water-intensive crops because farmers simply can't afford the irrigation cost anymore. Number 2. Coconut oil. This tropical oil that became the darling of health enthusiasts and professional chefs is facing a crisis that starts with tiny beetles and ends with empty store shelves. The Philippines and Indonesia produce 75% of the world's coconut oil, and their coconut palm plantations are under attack from an invasive pest called the coconut rhinoceros beetle that's spreading faster than containment efforts can stop it. These beetles aren't just eating coconut trees, they're boring into the heart of palm trees and killing them from the inside out. A single beetle can destroy a coconut palm that took 15 years to reach full production. Pacific Island communities that have depended on coconut cultivation for centuries are watching their economic foundation crumble as beetle infestations spread from island to island. But here's where the story gets really complicated. Coconut palms are incredibly sensitive to soil salinity, and rising sea levels are pushing salt water into coastal growing areas where most coconut trees are planted. The combination of beetle damage and saltwater intrusion is creating a double disaster that's forcing coconut farmers to abandon their groves entirely. Climate change is hitting coconut production in ways that nobody anticipated. Coconut palms require very specific temperature and humidity ranges to produce high-quality coconuts with the oil content that makes them commercially viable. Recent weather patterns have pushed many traditional coconut growing regions outside these optimal ranges, resulting in coconuts with dramatically lower oil yields. The ripple effects are already hitting specialty food stores and health food manufacturers. Coconut oil prices have tripled in the past 2 years, but that's nothing compared to what industry analysts predict for 2025. Many companies that built their entire product lines around coconut oil are frantically searching for alternatives or preparing to shut down operations entirely. Here's something most consumers don't realize. Not all coconut oil is created equal. The virgin coconut oil that health enthusiasts prefer requires fresh coconuts that are processed within hours of harvesting. As coconut supplies become more scarce and expensive, manufacturers are switching to cheaper processing methods that produce oil with drastically different nutritional profiles and flavors. Number 1. Almonds. Save the most shocking revelation for last because this tree nut that seems so abundant and reliable is facing a catastrophe that will reshape snacking and baking forever. California produces 80% of the world's almonds, and their almond orchards are caught in a death spiral of drought, disease, and economic pressures that's forcing farmers to make impossible choices. Here's the brutal math that's keeping almond farmers awake at night. It takes 1 gallon of water to produce a single almond. During California's ongoing drought, water costs have skyrocketed to levels that make almond farming financially impossible for many growers. Farmers who used to pay hundreds of dollars per acre-foot of water are now facing bills of thousands of dollars for the same amount. But water costs are just the beginning of the crisis. Almond trees are incredibly vulnerable to a fungal disease called whole rot that thrives in the humid conditions created by California's increasingly erratic weather patterns. This disease doesn't just reduce yields. It can kill entire orchards within a single growing season. Farmers describe walking through groves where trees that produced bumper crops just last year are now dying from fungal infections that spread faster than treatments can be applied. The economic pressures go far beyond just production costs. Almond trees take 5 to 7 years to reach full production after planting, which means farmers must make massive investments without knowing what market conditions will look like when their trees finally start producing nuts. Many farmers who planted almonds during the boom years of the 2010s are now facing mature trees that cost more to maintain than the almonds are worth. Here's something that will change how you think about almonds forever. Many California almond orchards are being bulldozed and converted to solar farms because the guaranteed income from solar panels is more reliable than trying to grow almonds in an increasingly unpredictable climate. Farmers who spent decades nurturing almond trees are literally watching them get destroyed to make room for solar panels. The domino effect is already hitting every product category that depends on almonds. Almond milk manufacturers are struggling with supply shortages and price volatility that make it nearly impossible to maintain consistent pricing. Bakeries that depend on almond flour for gluten-free products are rationing supplies or reformulating recipes to use different ingredients entirely. But here's where this gets really personal for millions of Americans. Almonds aren't just a snack food anymore. They've become a crucial protein source for people following plant-based diets, and there's no perfect substitute that provides the same nutritional profile and versatility. When almond supplies become unreliable, entire dietary approaches that millions of people depend on will need to be completely reconsidered. The writing is on the wall, and smart consumers are already taking action. Health food stores are reporting unprecedented demand for bulk almonds as customers stock up before prices climb even higher. Professional bakers are hoarding almond flour like it's precious metal because they understand that consistent supplies may not be available much longer. This isn't just about higher prices or temporary shortages. We're looking at fundamental changes to how America eats, and most people have no idea what's coming. The question isn't whether these disruptions will happen. Industry insiders are already preparing for them. The question is whether you'll be ready when they do. The smart money is already moving. While most shoppers are still tossing these items into their carts without a second thought, grocery executives are quietly preparing for what's next. Internal memos from 3 major chains show they're already negotiating contracts for synthetic substitutes and imported alternatives that most customers have never heard of. Some companies aren't just surviving, they're thriving. Mountain View Provisions, a family business in Oregon, saw almond shortages coming years ago and invested in cashew-based nut butters. Today, 85% of blind taste testers can't tell the difference. And while competitors scramble for overpriced almonds, Mountain View is expanding. In Vermont, another startup perfected a birch-based syrup richer in minerals than maple, offering restaurants a way out of paying $40 a bottle for the real thing. This is the dividing line. Those who adapt will thrive, while those who cling to old systems will scramble. Regional grocery chains are already signing exclusive deals with alternative suppliers, meaning some areas will enjoy access to substitutes while others face empty shelves. These disruptions aren't random. They align with harvest cycles, shipping contracts, and storage limits. The end of August 2025 is the convergence point where those stresses collide. But there's a silver lining. Just as World War II accelerated food innovation, today's crisis is spurring breakthroughs. Scientists are developing preservation methods to extend shelf life, breeding drought-resistant crops, and building direct-to-consumer networks that cut out vulnerable middlemen. For consumers, this means preparation isn't just about stockpiling. It's about embracing new foods, learning forgotten preservation skills, and supporting local producers who operate outside fragile global supply chains. The families who succeed won't necessarily have the biggest pantries. They'll be the ones who adjusted their eating habits, discovered new favorites, and built relationships with smaller suppliers. They'll turn disruption into opportunity, eating healthier, spending smarter, and living more sustainably. This isn't about panic. Panic causes the very shortages people fear. This is about smart preparation, using insider knowledge to make informed decisions before the crowd catches on. You now have insights that 99% of shoppers don't. That puts you ahead of the curve. Start small and start smart. Try alternatives, build modest reserves, and learn simple preservation skills. Preparation doesn't have to overwhelm you. It should empower you. Every challenge creates room for innovation and resilience. If this gave you a clearer view of what's coming, hit that like button so others can prepare too. Comment with the item that surprised you most. And subscribe, because next week I'll be revealing an even bigger shift in our water supply that nobody's talking about. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Stay informed, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.